The story is based on a true incident which happened in Florida. A man hid a GPS tracker on a woman's car to orchestrate chance encounters. It was Friday, and my best friend Carla and I had decided to go out to a club downtown. We wanted to blow off steam after a grueling week at work. I was dealing with a major project, and Carla had her own stress from her new job at a design firm. We agreed that dancing and a few drinks would be the perfect remedy. I wore a sparkly black dress and high heels that clicked sharply on the dance floor. As the night progressed, I felt free and alive, eventually losing track of how many drinks I'd had. I guess 3 or 4, maybe 5. My head started to spin and I brushed it off as the typical buzz of alcohol. Around 2 a.m., Carla and I finally left the club. She realized she lost her grandmother's brooch, something she always carried in her purse for sentimental reasons. I promised we'd come back the next day to check the club's lost and found or ask security for help. We walked unsteadily to a cab, and I remember thinking that the headache pounding behind my eyes felt more intense than any hangover I'd ever had. By the time I got home, I was exhausted. I barely managed to change out of my dress, collapsing into bed without setting my alarm. That night, I had the strangest dream. A tall, dark-haired man proposed to me in a lavish garden filled with red roses. He slipped a ring on my finger, whispering sweet promises of eternal love and devotion. The dream felt so real that I could smell the roses and feel the soft breeze against my arms. By morning, I woke with a pounding headache and a hazy recollection of that man's face in my dream. "Carla, you won't believe the dream I had," I groaned over the phone later that morning. My head throbbed, and I assumed it was just dehydration and a massive hangover. "You sound awful," she said, her voice laced with concern. "Drink some water. I'll come over in a bit. We'll go back to the club to ask about my brooch." That afternoon, we headed to the club to speak to the manager about the lost brooch. They promised to check the security footage. Since we couldn't do more at that moment, Carl and I decided to stop by a bookstore near the club. I was browsing through crime thrillers when I froze in place. Standing just a few feet away, flipping through a hardcover novel, was the same dark-haired man from my dream. My heart skipped a beat. He glanced up, and our eyes met for an instant. Feeling embarrassed and a bit shaken, I quickly turned away. Later, as I tried to hail a cab, I saw him again. This time standing across the street near a cafe, seemingly engrossed in conversation with someone. I found it odd but told myself it was just coincidence. When I saw him yet again at a busy intersection, I became convinced something strange was happening. "Carla, I keep seeing this man everywhere," I confessed over dinner. "He looks exactly like the one from my dream. It's starting to freak me out." "Maybe it's a sign," Carla teased, biting into her sandwich. "Or maybe you just have that dream image in your head, so you're noticing people who resemble him." Despite her logical explanation, I couldn't shake the feeling of destiny. I approached him at a flower shop a few days later. I remember feeling my heart hammering as I tapped him on the shoulder. "I'm sorry if this is weird," I stammered, "but have we met before?" He smiled, looking pleased rather than surprised. "I don't think so," he replied. "My name is Ben. I'm new to the city." My face grew hot with embarrassment. "I'm Mia. It's just, I keep seeing you around. It's almost like fate is forcing our paths to cross." That evening, Ben and I spent hours talking in a small coffee shop down the street. He was charming, articulate, and attentive. Everything I'd ever fantasized about. I started believing in fate, and soulmates, and things I'd once dismissed as fairy tales. Over the next few weeks, we coincidentally ran into each other repeatedly, and he'd invited me for lunch or coffee. Every time, I felt my heart flutter. Meanwhile, Carla had been returning to the club security office to check for any news on her missing brooch. One day, she called me with a tremor in her voice. "Mia, you need to see the footage they found." At first, I imagined she caught sight of a pickpocket or someone rummaging through her purse. But what she showed me on the grainy screen made my stomach twist. There was a man hovering near my drink at the bar. He casually slipped something into my glass when I wasn't looking. I leaned forward, squinting, trying to confirm the man's identity. My blood froze. It was Ben. But how was he making me see him in my sleep? He must have used some form of hypnosis while I was under the influence, planning the idea that he was my perfect match. That dream hadn't been a random vision. It was orchestrated. I'm doing this for us. He spoke calmly, as though it were the most rational statement in the world. I've known about you for a long time, Mia. I need you to realize that we were meant for each other. That's insane. He stepped closer, voice eerily soft. We belong together. I knew you wouldn't see it unless I gave you a little push. After I stormed out, I felt so violated that I didn't know where to turn first. Carla insisted we go to the police, and I agreed. On our way, she made another chilling discovery. A small GPS tracker beneath the bumper of my car. Now it all made sense. How he managed to show up everywhere I went. The next few days were a whirlwind of statements, evidence collection, and terrifying phone calls from unknown numbers. I'd hear breathing, then a click as the line went dead. Sometimes, I'd spot a dark car parked near my house late at night, its engine quietly running before it sped away. Paranoia consumed me. I slept at Carla's place, too afraid to be alone. Finally, the police were able to confront Ben. They had plenty to bring him in for questioning. My heart pounded when they informed us he had an extensive history of stalking and harassment, though he'd never been caught in such a flagrant act before. He was a textbook sociopath, they said, with a penchant for planning elaborate schemes to make unsuspecting women fall in love with him. In January, a Florida man was arrested for stalking after allegedly hiding a GPS tracker on a woman's car to orchestrate chance encounters. The 22-year-old Chipotle worker, name kept private for personal reasons, purchased the tracking device from Best Buy and secretly installed it on the victim's vehicle. The woman, who had a brief relationship with the man a few years ago, discovered the device last year and alerted authorities. Through subpoenas, investigators traced the purchase. During questioning, he admitted to the act. Arrested on a felony charge, the man was booked into jail but released after posting a $5,000 bond. This story is inspired from a true story which happened in the year 2018 in Pennsylvania. The police received a disturbing call from a mother accusing her 42-year-old son. I was trying to impress my father by driving us home from a routine grocery run. My knuckles went white on the freeway. My father joked about my tension. "Andrew," he said in a calm voice, "loosen up a bit. You'll end up cutting the circulation to your fingers." I forced a grin and relaxed my grip. "Sorry, I'm just a little nervous. I got precious cargo after all," I joked, glancing over at him with what I hoped was confidence. He laughed, a deep rumble that instantly made me feel safer. But in the span of a heartbeat, everything changed. A pair of headlights emerged out of nowhere, swerving into my lane. I panicked, yanking the wheel too hard to the right and crashing into the guardrail. When I looked over, my father was slumped forward, eyes shut. He didn't respond when I called his name. My mind raced. What had I done? He died at the hospital 2 hours later. My mother, who had been in the waiting room crying into her hands, collapsed when the doctor told her the news. I was too numb to move. The weeks following his funeral were a haze of guilt, nightmares, and funeral flowers wilting in vases scattered around our house. My mother, Margaret, said very little to me, but when she did speak, every word dripped with blame. "You killed him," she hissed once, eyes bloodshot and rimmed with salt from her tears. "You destroyed our family. Now you have to make it right." So I tried. Despite reeling from my own grief, I took on the roles my father had once carried, paying bills, fixing anything broken in the house, and gradually managing her medications. She spiraled into a severe depression. At first, it manifested as a refusal to eat. Then she would disappear into her bedroom for days at a time. She began talking to herself. I'd find her in the kitchen at night, muttering curses under her breath. When she saw me, her eyes would fill with loathing. "Don't pretend you care. she once growled, slamming the fridge door.
If you cared, you would have died in that car instead of your father.
Despite her venom, I did care. I felt responsible, convinced that helping her heal was my penance. I attended her doctor's appointments, refilled her prescriptions, and made sure she took her antidepressants. I tried to coax her into therapy sessions. The only reason she even agreed was her fear of being locked away in an institution. It was always the same threat. If the doctors discovered how dangerous and unstable she had become, they'd take her away from me. She never voiced it directly, but the fear in her eyes told me enough. Yet behind closed doors, she unleashed her torment on me. She would lash out, throw porcelain plates or glass mugs across the living room. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I would wake to find her standing in my doorway with a kitchen knife, her fingers trembling around the handle.
I want to end you,
she would say it quietly, though she would never come closer. Afterward, she'd fall into a fit of sobs, scratch at her arms until she bled, or lock herself in the bathroom for hours. I still remember one night. My bedroom light was out, and I awoke to a sharp sting across my cheek. She had slapped me so hard I saw stars. When I flicked the lamp on, I saw her there, eyes wild, tears streaming, her nails digging into her own arms. I cradled her until she stopped screaming. The next day, when neighbors asked about the noise, I lied and said we had a minor argument about the bills. Detective Morales entered our lives about 6 months later, after a neighbor anonymously reported disturbing sounds coming from her house. I answered the door, heart pounding, worried that if anyone found out about my mother's deteriorating mental health, they'd lock her up for good. "I'm Detective Morales," he said, flashing his badge. "Neighbors have expressed concern for your mother's well-being. May I come in?" I forced a polite smile, stepping aside. "Of course, Detective. My mother's been grieving, but everything is under control." I tried to keep my voice steady. From the living room, I heard a sudden crash. My mother's voice rang out, shrill and accusatory.
Andrew, what are you doing?
"She's had a rough day. I'll introduce you." I led him into the living room, where she stood among shards of broken pottery, her breathing ragged. "Mom," I said softly, "this is Detective Morales. He's just checking to see if we're okay." She shot me a deadly glare before forcing the most unsettling smile I'd ever seen.
Andrew's taking care of me,
she said sweetly.
"We're fine."
Morales eyed the broken vase on the floor. "If you're sure," he said, handing me his card. "Call me if you need help." As he turned to leave, my mother's face twisted into something furious, but she remained silent until he was gone. After that, my life became a series of elaborate cover-ups. I'd do anything to avoid raising suspicion, patching up holes in the wall where she'd thrown things, buying new plates to replace shattered ones, lying about mysterious bruises on my arms. If the doctor started asking too many questions, I'd change the subject or reschedule the appointment. With each passing day, her rage grew, and my guilt deepened. One afternoon, I heard my mother rummaging through my father's old things. She emerged with a toy lightsaber, some silly gift I'd given Dad one Father's Day as a nod to our shared love of sci-fi movies. She began to sob uncontrollably.
"You took him away! You deserve to suffer for the rest of your life!"
Before I could react, she started swinging the plastic toy at her own arms, striking herself again and again. Red welts appeared across her forearms. Panicking, I grabbed her wrists. "What are you doing?" I asked, desperately trying to calm her. Suddenly, she bolted into the kitchen, dialed 911, and shouted,
"Help! My son is attacking me!"
She flung the lightsaber on the floor, tears streaming down her face, and pounded her fists against her own chest.
"He's beating me!"
She screamed again, practically shrieking into the phone. I stood there, frozen. When the police arrived, lights flashing outside our window, I forced myself to remain calm. The officers rushed in and arrested me as my mother collapsed into a pitiful heap on the living room floor. She looked so fragile in that moment. The trial that followed was swift. The evidence against me seemed insurmountable. The injuries on her arms, the testimony of the neighbor who'd heard her screams. Morales pulled me aside before the court hearing. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "There's something you're not telling me." I just shook my head. "I can't," I said. "It's better this way." I was sentenced to community service and mandatory anger management classes, narrowly avoiding prison. In late April 2018, a shocking case emerged in Du Bois, Pennsylvania. On April 27th, police responded to a disturbance call and found 75-year-old Joan Vargas bleeding from head and wrist injuries. She alleged that her son, 42-year-old Andrew Vargas, had attacked her with a Star Wars lightsaber, repeatedly striking her as she sat in a chair. When questioned, Andrew denied the accusations, claiming his mother was harming herself. However, police arrested him.
This story is inspired from a true story which happened in New York, where a woman conned her friends, banks, and hotels. More details later.
I had a terrible childhood. My family was so poor that there were times when we didn't have any food in the house. My parents tried to provide for us, but Dad was always out of work and Mom wasted her money on gambling. I never told anyone because I was so embarrassed. When I was in high school, I started shoplifting clothes. I was surprisingly good at it. When I was at school, I acted like the happiest person alive. I started making friends, though I never invited them over to see the real me. Most nights, I'd convince my friends to have me over for dinner. That way I was getting steady meals. One of my friends, Becky, eventually found out, but she agreed to keep my secret and even helped me with money whenever she could. I stopped talking to her after graduation because I wanted to leave my messed up childhood far behind me. But at the time, she was a lifesaver. I'm 27 now, and my life couldn't be any different. All my friends are filthy rich. I have an amazing boyfriend, Derek, who lavishes me with gifts. I only wear designer clothes like Gucci and Louis Vuitton. I barely have a cent in my bank account, but that doesn't matter. I act like a socialite, so people just automatically assume I have money. I often go out partying with friends, but I've learned how to trick them into always paying the bill. It's a lot easier than you think. All I do is say things like, "I'll take you out for drinks next time," or, "I'm sorry, can we use your card? I forgot mine in my other purse." Worked every time. My friends were so rich that they didn't notice or didn't care. Derek and I were getting pretty serious, so I figured that a marriage was in our future. Once that happened, I'd have all the money I'd ever need. All I had to do was maintain my lifestyle for another few months without anyone discovering I was a fraud. Then something terrible happened. I had just woken up after a wild party at Jarway. I had a terrible hangover and could barely remember the night before. We danced a lot, and since Derek was out of town, I made out with some really hot guys. I sort of got into an altercation with some trashy girls who didn't belong there, but that kind of thing usually happened. As someone who pretends to be rich, it's important to act bitchy toward the people below me. Anyway, that morning, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of my bank account. It showed that I only had a couple $100. It came with a short message. "Want me to send this to your socialite friends?" My heart sank. I had no idea who would do this to me. But if they followed through with the threat, I'd lose everything. Derek would leave me. All my friends would abandon me. I'd have nothing. I called the number. A woman answered. I didn't recognize the voice. "Have I got your attention?"
Who are you?
"Just a stranger. Now listen carefully, or I'll ruin your life." The woman explained that she would expose me that day unless I paid her off. Since I didn't have any money to give, she'd accept payment in clothes and jewelry. She knew about all the expensive things that I'd accumulated over the years, and she wanted them for herself. I tried to bargain with her. I offered to give her 3 dresses and 2 handbags, but she knew that I had much more than that. She wanted everything. To show that she was serious, she sent another photo. This one was from me as a child, standing in front of her trailer, wearing a dirty hand-me-down dress. "I have lots more, so what do you say?" I eventually gave in. I got out 3 suitcases and started stuffing all my favorite possessions inside. To make sure I was giving her everything, she made me switch to a video call so she could watch me clean out my closet. She didn't turn on her own camera, of course. After 20 horrible minutes, I'd packed away thousands of dollars worth of my belongings. Then she gave me an address where I could drop everything off. Sobbing, I took the suitcases down to my car and left. The address was in a terrible neighborhood 1 city over. I hated driving to a place like that. It was dangerous. Worse, it was trashy. I followed my GPS to the exact location where a woman was waiting for me. She looked about my age, though she was quite unattractive. The kind of person who really didn't spend any time taking care of herself. Before I got out of my car, I tried to figure out if I knew her. Then it hit me. She was one of the women I insulted the night before. She'd come into the club wearing Walmart clothes and too much makeup. She didn't belong there, and I said that to her face. Was that why she was blackmailing me? Because I was slightly mean to her at a party? I got out of the car. She was grinning at me. So, do you recognize me now? I told her I remembered her from the club. That wasn't the right answer, apparently. Her face twisted in anger, and it looked like she was fighting off the urge to lunge at me.
You really don't know who I am?
I shrugged. That's when she lunged at me. She shoved me hard against my car, screaming into my face.
I'm Becky! You still don't recognize your former best friend?
I pushed her back. Now that she introduced herself, I did recognize her from my childhood. The years had not been kind to her. I understood why she was so angry that I'd insulted her, and why she had photographs from when I was a kid. Once she calmed down, she explained that she worked at my bank and was able to get a photo of my account information. She also said that after I'd gotten her kicked out of the club, she spent all last night gathering all my contacts and planning a revenge. I tried to apologize, but it was too late. She still wanted me to give her all my stuff, so I did. I wheeled out the suitcases full of my priceless belongings and left that at her feet. That was all she wanted. She deleted the photos from her phone and told me to leave. She never wanted to see me again. I apologized again, though she still didn't believe me, and I drove back home. I was sad to lose so many valuable things, but at least my reputation was safe. That was my most important possession after all. But when I got back to Derek's place, my phone started buzzing. All at once, I got texts from dozens of my friends. I was too afraid to open them. I also got a text from Derek. That one I had to open. Get out of my house, now. Even though I'd given Becky everything she'd asked for, she still exposed me to everyone. My life was ruined. That afternoon, I drove all the way back to my parents' trailer. I had no place else to go.
Anna Delvey, born Anna Sorokin, posed as a wealthy German heiress to infiltrate New York City's elite. After moving to NYC in 2013, she conned friends, banks, and hotels by promising repayments and using fake wire transfers. Between 2013 and 2017, Delvey lived lavishly, networking with celebrities and CEOs while leaving unpaid bills. She devised the Anna Delvey Foundation, a luxury members-only club, and attempted to secure multi-million-dollar loans through fraudulent means. In 2017, after abandoning a friend with a $62,000 bill in Morocco, Delvey was arrested and charged with stealing $300,000 and attempting to steal $22 million.
I grew up in a really small town, so there weren't a lot of places for me and my friends to hang out. Back in high school, we either went to a crappy skate park or the open dirt field behind Walmart. Back then, my best friend was named Grady. I thought he was really fun, but my mom always warned me that he was a bad influence. He was the kind of guy who didn't take school seriously and always mouthed off to the teachers. He was particularly mean to our algebra teacher, Miss Phelps. He slashed her tires, stole money from her purse. He even made her cry once when he drew a picture of her on the back of his homework. I didn't join in whenever Grady was being disruptive in school, but I never stopped him either. I guess I was just too afraid to lose him as a friend. The summer before senior year, Grady and I were hanging out behind Walmart throwing rocks at pigeons. It was Grady's idea, of course. He had been held back twice, which meant he was already 18, but he acted like a 12-year-old. It was late afternoon and pretty hot too. I was telling Grady about a joke that my dad told me when he interrupted me screaming, "Dude, look, look!" He was pointing towards the back of Walmart, where the trucks pulled in to load up supplies. I saw a short, chubby woman in a Walmart uniform carrying boxes. It took me a second to recognize that this was Miss Phelps, our algebra teacher. I couldn't believe it. Grady instantly started laughing. "I guess she has a second job for the summer," he said. "What a loser. She probably has gambling debts." "Yeah," I said. "Probably." I didn't want to argue with him, even though I knew that teachers barely get paid anything, and the fact that this was her second job wasn't really something you should laugh at. "Dude," he said, "this is so embarrassing. Come on." He grabbed my wrist and pulled me closer to the building. The year before, some business had tried to build something on this empty field, but for some reason, they never finished it. So the field had a lot of holes and dirt piles. We hid behind one of the piles so we could watch Miss Phelps without seeing us. Now, I was pretty close enough to see her face. I felt pretty sorry for her. The boxes she was carrying must have been pretty heavy because her face was red and sweaty. She looked miserable. Grady nudged me in the side. "Dude, watch this." He picked up a medium-sized rock, and before I could stop him, he threw it at our teacher. Grady wasn't a good thrower. Back when he was terrorizing pigeons, he always missed. But this time, the rock hits its target. It crashed into Miss Phelps's back just as she was stepping onto the ramp. I watched in horror as she fell backwards and landed hard on the concrete. The box must have been filled with something fragile because it made a loud, shattering noise when it fell on top of her. Grady looked at me in a panic. We both knew that we couldn't run away without her seeing us, so we both stayed perfectly still behind the dirt pile. Miss Phelps looked all around her to see who had thrown the rock. She looked right at the dirt pile, and for an awful second, I thought she knew we were there. She stood up and started limping towards us when her manager rushed out and demanded to know what happened. She explained what happened, but the manager didn't seem to care. He pointed towards the dropped box, which must have had something pretty valuable inside, and he just screamed at her. It was awful. She was getting blamed for something that we did. He screamed so much that Grady and I had enough time to run out of the field before anybody saw us. Afterwards, Grady and I went back to my house. Grady was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. He said that he hoped Miss Phelps would get fired. And that was when I finally had enough. I told him I did not want to be his friend anymore. I said that people were right about him. He was a bad influence. Then I asked him to leave. I knew that the rest of the summer would be really boring without someone to hang out with, but I had to get him out of my life. I was shocked to see him at my front door the next morning. He apologized and promised that he wouldn't hurt anyone ever again. He asked if I wanted to come with him and just walk around for a bit. He seemed pretty sincere, so I said yes. But I should have known he had something else planned. We walked down to our town's main road and ended up once again behind Walmart. He smiled darkly. He then started walking into the empty field. I suspected that he wanted to terrorize Miss Phelps again, so I told him that I didn't want to go. He promised over and over that he didn't plan to do anything, but I knew he was lying, so I told him no. That's when he snapped. He cussed me out and told me that I was chicken for abandoning him. Then he scooped up one of the biggest rocks he could find and walked back to the dirt pile. I could see that Miss Phelps was once again moving boxes in the back of the building. She was even limping a little, I guess from the fall of the day before. Grady looked at me, warning me with his eyes that I better not say anything. I knew I should have gone to Miss Phelps and told her, but I was too intimidated. I just waited on the sidewalk. Then, just as Grady snuck into the hiding spot behind the dirt pile, I heard a loud crash, and then heard Grady screaming in pain. I couldn't see what happened, but I could tell that he'd gotten hurt. "Oh God," he screamed. "My leg!" He must have fallen into a hole. Instead of running toward him, I ran towards Miss Phelps. I figured she could help me call an ambulance or something. "Miss Phelps," I said, "do you have a phone? I think Grady's hurt." She looked at me. I'll never forget the smile on her face. "I know," she said. "I spent the whole night digging this trap." I backed away from her. You wanted him to get hurt?" I asked. "It's karma," she said. "Now I know he's your friend, so I won't stop you from calling the hospital, but just know that no one else is coming out here for a long, long time. So if you don't say anything, no one will hear him." "Do you have a phone?" I repeated. "Yes," she said. She dug into her pocket and handed me her phone. I could still hear his screams for help. I was about to dial 911 when Miss Phelps asked me, "Have you ever wondered what your life would be like without Grady?" I paused for a moment. Then, I handed her back the phone. I didn't call the cops at that moment. In fact, I never did. "See you at school," she said, and walked back to Walmart. On my walk back home, I ran into some other kids from school. They weren't really my friends because Grady always told me they were losers. I asked them if they wanted to hang out, and they said yes. The next day, I went back to the empty field, and there was no more hole. Someone had filled it in and left. No one ever saw Grady again. I probably should have told the police about what happened, but I never did. I was too busy enjoying my senior year.